Hello, friends of the channel. This is a story where three friends travel on a night train. When they discover that there is a spy on board, they try to alert the police, but the authorities do not listen to them. So the three friends decide to do everything they can to stop the spy. Please support us by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Danger on the Midnight Train. The iron rhythm of the Midnight Star cut through the freezing silence of the Appalachian Pass. A rhythmic clack-clack, clack-clack that usually lulled passengers to sleep. But inside compartment 4B, the air was thick with something sharper than exhaustion. Michael, an architect whose mind functioned like a blueprint of angles and structural weaknesses, sat across from Claire, a freelance journalist with a reputation for pulling threads until entire tapestries unraveled. Beside her was Mark, a former motor pool mechanic for the Army, a man of few words and heavy hands. They were headed to a reunion in Vermont, a trip that was supposed to be defined by nostalgia and cheap dining car coffee. Instead, it was about to become a desperate struggle for survival. The shift began at 2:14 a.m. Michael, unable to sleep, stepped out into the narrow, dimly lit corridor to find the attendant. As he passed the luxury sleepers, the train took a sharp, screeching curve, throwing him against the mahogany door of Suite 12. The door wasn't latched. It swung inward an inch, revealing a sliver of blue light. Inside, a man named Vance, a passenger Michael had seen earlier wearing a tailored charcoal suit, was hunched over a briefcase that looked more like a portable server. A digital map of the eastern seaboard's power grid flickered on a screen, with red icons pulsing over the main substations. Michael's breath hitched. He saw Vance slide a drive into the port and whisper into a satellite phone in a language that sounded cold and surgical. This wasn't a businessman. This was a ghost in the machine. Michael retreated to 4B, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. When he told Claire and Mark, the atmosphere shifted instantly from boredom to high-stakes tension. "He's not just watching," Michael whispered, his voice trembling. "He's uploading something." The grid icons were turning black. Claire's eyes sharpened. This was the story of a lifetime, or perhaps the end of one. Mark simply stood up and checked the hallway. "If he's who you think he is, he's not alone," Mark noted grimly. They decided to do the right thing first. They hurried through the rocking cars to the conductor's station, where two transit police officers, Officer Miller and his partner, were sharing a thermos of coffee. Claire took the lead, her voice steady and professional as she described what Michael had seen. But Miller didn't even stand up. He looked at their disheveled clothes, Mark's grease-stained jacket and Michael's panicked eyes, and let out a short, dry laugh. "Look, lady, it's a long night. People see things in the shadows. Maybe your friend saw a guy playing a high-def video game. Now, go back to your seats before I cite you for public intoxication." The dismissiveness was a physical blow. Even when Michael pleaded, describing the technical specificity of the map, Miller's face hardened into a mask of bureaucratic indifference. They were alone on a bullet train moving at 80 miles per hour through a wilderness where no one could hear them scream. The dynamism of the night shifted into a frantic, improvised mission. Mark, drawing on his military training, realized they couldn't wait for the next station. The border was only 40 minutes away, and once the train crossed into the dead zone of the mountains, Vance would likely transmit the final kill code to the grid. "We have to cut the power to his suite or find the transmitter," Mark decided. But as they crept back toward the luxury cars, the drama took a violent turn. They weren't just being ignored by the police. They were being hunted. In the narrow vestibule between the dining car and the sleepers, a man in a waiter's uniform, but with the calculated stance of a mercenary, blocked their path. He didn't ask questions. He pulled a suppressed pistol. "Get in the kitchen," he hissed. The friends realized with a jolt of horror that the conspiracy ran deeper than one man in a suite. The staff had been compromised. In a burst of desperate action, Mark lunged forward, using his weight to pin the gunman's arm against the vibrating metal wall. Michael grabbed a heavy copper pot from a hanging rack and swung with a primal roar, knocking the weapon loose. The struggle was chaotic, the smell of burnt oil and ozone filling the air as the train leaned into another turn. They managed to shove the mercenary into a walk-in freezer and bar the door, but the clock was ticking. Then came the first unexpected twist. As they scrambled toward the communications array, they ran into Officer Miller again. For a second, Michael felt relief until he saw Miller holding the mercenary's suppressed pistol. Miller wasn't just lazy. He was the inside man. "You three just couldn't stay in your holes," Miller sneered, his voice barely audible over the roar of the tracks. He leveled the gun at Claire's chest. The betrayal stung more than the cold. In a moment of pure journalistic bravado, Claire didn't flinch. She threw her heavy camera bag at Miller's face. The flash went off, a blinding white burst in the dim corridor, and in that second of disorientation, the three friends bolted for the only place left to go. Up. They scrambled up the emergency ladder to the roof of the train. The transition from the muffled interior to the roof was a sensory assault. The wind was a freezing gale, screaming at 80 miles per hour, and the stars above were blurred by the speed. Snow lashed their faces as they crawled along the corrugated metal spine of the Midnight Star. Below them, thousands of tons of steel thundered over a trestle bridge. Michael led the way, his architect's mind calculating the distance to the signal booster mounted above Suite 12. The action reached a fever pitch as Vance himself emerged from a hatch, his charcoal suit ruined by the wind, a look of murderous intent on his face. He wasn't going to let three nobodies ruin a decade of planning. He fired, the bullets sparking off the metal roof near Michael's hands. Mark shouted for the others to keep moving and tackled Vance. The two men rolled across the top of the swaying train, a brutal ballet of shadows against the moonlit snow. One slip meant certain death in the dark ravine below. While Mark fought for his life, Michael and Claire reached the transmitter. "I need to bridge the circuit," Michael yelled over the roar of the wind. "If I can short the antenna, the surge will fry his briefcase." Claire held Michael's legs as he leaned over the edge of the moving car, his fingers numbing in the sub-zero air. He saw the glowing blue cables. With a desperate prayer, he jammed a metal file into the junction box. A massive arc of blue electricity exploded, throwing Michael back and sending a shockwave through the entire train. The lights in the carriages below flickered and died. The transmission was dead. Vance, seeing his life's work vanish into a cloud of sparks, let out a scream of rage and tried to throw Mark off the edge. But the train hit a sudden braking sequence. The emergency sabotage had tripped the engine sensors. The sudden deceleration sent Vance skidding toward the end of the car. He lunged for a railing, missed, and vanished into the night, swallowed by the Appalachian forest. As the Midnight Star came to a grinding, sparking halt in the middle of a snow-covered field, the silence that followed was deafening. Michael, Claire, and Mark lay on the roof, gasping for air, their lungs burning. Minutes later, the real authorities, alerted by the massive electromagnetic surge, descended from Black Hawk helicopters, their searchlights cutting through the dark. Miller was found cowering in the cargo hold, and the briefcase was recovered, its drive fried beyond repair. The three friends sat on the edge of the tracks, wrapped in emergency blankets, watching the sun begin to bleed over the horizon. They had started the night as passengers. They ended it as the silent guardians of a world that would never even know it had been at risk.